Ever been judged by how you look? This woman walked into a fancy car shop in jeans and a t-shirt, and the salesman treated her like dirt. But what happened next? You won't believe it. Maggie walked into the shiny car place. It was full of super expensive cars. She was just wearing simple clothes, jeans and a white t-shirt. She wanted to ask about a really fancy car. A salesman looked her up and down like she was something gross. He sneered, "I think you're lost." These cars cost a lot of money, and pointed to the door. Other people working there laughed, and some customers stared. Maggie felt her face get hot with embarrassment. She didn't say anything and just left. The next morning, guess what showed up at that car place? A super fancy Rolls-Royce Phantom, all shiny and new. The back door opened, and the salesman's mouth dropped open. He never saw this coming. The car place was called Boston Luxury Motors. It looked amazing in the morning light. Big glass windows showed off all the dream cars inside. Porsches, Bentleys, Ferraris. Each one cost more than most houses. Maggie Collins, or just Maggie to her friends, walked in. Her brown hair bounced a little as she walked. Her simple clothes and no makeup showed she cared more about what she did than how she looked. She was 35 and seemed sure of herself. What you couldn't tell just by looking at her was that Maggie started a huge charity called the Collins Foundation. It helped kids with disabilities and changed so many young lives. Before she met her husband, she built this charity from nothing, putting all her energy and knowledge into making things better for these kids. She walked into the showroom and saw a sleek dark blue car. It was perfect for her sister Caroline's 40th birthday. Caroline had always wanted a fancy car, and after beating cancer last year, Maggie wanted to give her something really special. Maggie could easily afford it. Her charity was successful, and her investments did well, but most people didn't know she had a lot of money. Across the room, the sales manager, Blake Thompson, fixed his tie. He thought he was good at knowing who would buy a car. When he saw Maggie in her casual clothes, he smirked and nodded to his friends. He thought this would be funny. "Good morning," Maggie smiled at a young salesman named Daniel. "Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors. I'm Daniel. What are you looking for today?" he asked. Before Maggie could answer, Blake stepped in smoothly. "I'll handle this, Daniel," he said, then turned to Maggie with a fake smile. "Looking for directions, ma'am." And that's how Maggie's day at the car place started. It would be a day that changed how everyone there thought about things. "Actually," Maggie said nicely, "I'm interested in that midnight blue car." She pointed to the $285,000 car on a raised platform. Blake Thompson's smile got tight. He'd seen people like her before, dreaming about cars they could never buy. He was trying to meet his sales goals for the month and had important customers coming later. He didn't have time for this. "That's the limited edition Azure. Only 15 were made this year," he said slowly, like she was a child. "Maybe I could show you our used cars. They're in another building, a few blocks that way." Maggie saw his eyes look at her simple clothes and worn shoes. She was used to people judging her. They had no idea she chose to live simply, even though she was wealthy. "I'd really like to know more about this one," she said politely. "Could I see the inside?" Blake's face turned sour. The other two salesmen behind him exchanged looks. "The Azure is by appointment only," he lied smoothly. "Our serious customers usually schedule private viewings." Just then, a couple dressed in expensive clothes walked in. Blake's whole attitude changed. "Please excuse me," he said to Maggie without even looking at her. "Why don't you take a brochure? Daniel can help you with that." He rushed over to the couple, all smiles. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, wonderful to see you again." Daniel, the young salesman, looked sorry. He couldn't have been older than 25, and his suit looked too big. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. "Would you like me to tell you about the Azure?" "I would, thank you," Maggie replied. As Daniel excitedly told her about the car, Maggie saw Blake leading the well-dressed couple straight to the Azure. He opened the door with a big show, inviting Mrs. Harrington to sit inside. The same car he said was by appointment only. "That's quite all right," Maggie told the now uncomfortable Daniel. "I understand how these things work." Across the showroom, Blake was doing his sales talk. "This particular model has an 8-month waiting list, but I've kept one aside for special clients." Mrs. Harrington ran her hand over the leather inside. "It's beautiful, but I'm not sure about the color." We can definitely talk about custom options, Blake assured her. Maggie walked over quietly, standing close enough to hear. Excuse me, she said. I was hoping to ask about buying this model. Blake's face tightened. As I said before, this vehicle is being shown to these customers, he said, barely hiding his annoyance. Maybe you could come back another time, or as I suggested, check our used cars. The couple looked uncomfortably between Blake and Maggie. I'm specifically interested in this car, Maggie said calmly, for my sister's birthday next month. Blake stepped away from the Harringtons, lowering his voice. Look, I get that people like to dream, but this is a business. That car costs more than most houses. I've been patient, but you're interrupting a real sale. Several nearby customers had stopped to watch. Daniel stood nearby, looking worried. I'm prepared to make a cash purchase today, Maggie said, staying calm. That's when Blake's polite act completely broke. He laughed, a short, harsh sound that everyone in the showroom could hear. Several heads turned. A cash purchase? Really? His voice was louder now, meant to embarrass her. This isn't a cheap market. We're talking about $250,000. People who can afford these cars don't dress like… He waved his hand dismissively at her clothes. Maggie felt her cheeks get hot. Not because she was embarrassed for herself, she'd dealt with this before, but because she was angry for anyone who had ever been judged by how they looked. I believe my money is as good as anyone else's, she said quietly. Blake stepped closer, towering over her. Let me be clear, he said, no longer trying to hide his dislike. You are wasting my time and embarrassing yourself. Either make an appointment for a serious discussion, dressed appropriately, or please leave. The showroom had gone silent. The Harringtons had moved away from the car, looking uncomfortable. Is there a problem here? A new voice joined the conversation. It was Richard Mason, the owner of the car place, drawn by the noise. Blake straightened his tie. No problem, sir. Just explaining to this lady that we operate by appointment for serious buyers. Richard Mason looked at the situation quickly, taking in Maggie's simple clothes and the watching crowd. His face showed which side he was on. I see, he said. Ms. Collins? Margaret Collins, Maggie corrected him. Miss Collins, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Our customers usually, well, they understand the special nature of our vehicles. I understand perfectly, Maggie replied, her voice steady even though she felt humiliated. Your sales manager has made your policies quite clear. Blake stepped forward again, his voice dripping with fake politeness. If you're really interested, which I doubt, you can call for an appointment. But I'd suggest bringing proof of funds and dressing the part. These cars, he gestured around the showroom, are for a certain class of people. A murmur went through the onlookers. Someone snickered. Maggie looked around at the judging faces, at Blake's smug look, at the owner's silent agreement with his employees' behavior. She'd faced prejudice before, but rarely so openly, so publicly. I see, she said simply, with her dignity still intact, but her feelings hurt. She turned and walked towards the exit. Behind her, she heard Blake's voice, not quite quiet enough. Some people just don't know their place. As she pushed through the glass doors into the morning sunlight, Maggie pulled out her phone. The humiliation stung, but a small, determined smile formed on her lips as she dialed a number. The Collins estate sat on 5 quiet acres outside Boston. It looked elegant, but didn't show off the billions behind its ownership. Alexander Collins liked it that way. At 41, the tech genius had changed how we store renewable energy, building a huge fortune while staying out of the spotlight. When Maggie walked into his home office, Alexander looked up from his desk and immediately put his work aside. 15 years of marriage had taught him to read her face. Something was wrong. What happened? He asked, coming around the desk to meet her. Maggie sank into a leather chair, the morning's events flooding back. It was educational, she said with a sad smile. She told him everything that happened at the car place, the condescension, the humiliation, the blatant disrespect. As she spoke, Alexander's face darkened, but he stayed quiet, letting her talk. It's not about me, she finished. I have the privilege of walking away knowing the truth. But how many people get treated like that every day, without knowing they actually could afford what they're being denied? Alexander nodded thoughtfully. This was what he loved most about Maggie, her constant care for others, even when she had been wronged. "So, what would you like to do about it?" he asked finally. "Part of me wants to do nothing," she admitted. "Just buy Caroline's gifts somewhere else. But then I think about that young salesman, Daniel, who treated me with respect no matter how I was dressed. And I think about all the people who face that kind of judgment without any way to fight back." She looked directly at Alexander. "These people need to understand that what you're worth isn't about how you look. But I don't want revenge. I want them to understand." Alexander nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. "I think I might have an idea that does both." "Nothing too dramatic," Maggie warned, knowing her husband's protective instincts. "No buying the dealership and firing everyone." Alexander laughed. "Nothing so cliché, but maybe," he leaned forward, his eyes twinkling. "A little education is in order." Together they started to plan, not for revenge, but for a lesson that might change how people saw each other. "Are you sure you don't want to come along?" Alexander asked when they had finished planning. Maggie shook her head. "This isn't about me needing to see them get what's coming to them. It's about them learning to see beyond appearances." She paused, then added with a smile, "But I expect a full report." As evening settled over their home, Alexander made several phone calls, setting things in motion for the next morning. Tomorrow would bring a powerful lesson in humility and the danger of making assumptions, not just for Blake Thompson, but for everyone at Boston Luxury Motors. Want to know what happens next? Hit that subscribe button and join our community of story lovers. The next morning was perfect. Blake Thompson walked into Boston Luxury Motors with a confident step, fixing his blue tie. He thought yesterday's incident with the badly dressed woman was funny, just another dreamer who didn't belong in their world of luxury. He'd even told his friends about it over drinks. The showroom looked amazing. Blake had just finished the morning meeting, telling the sales team how important it was to figure out if customers were serious buyers. "Remember," he'd said, "our time is valuable. We cater to a specific type of customer. It's not being snobby, it's just being efficient." Daniel, the young salesman, had been quiet during the meeting, looking uncomfortable. Blake made a mental note to talk to him later about how to properly judge customers. At exactly 10:17 a.m., the sound of an incredible engine drew everyone's attention outside. Through the big windows, a car unlike any other smoothly pulled up right in front of the main entrance. Conversations stopped. Even Blake, who was used to seeing fancy cars every day, felt his heart beat faster. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom extended wheelbase, but not just any Phantom. This one was custom-made, with a unique dark blue color that seemed to change in the sunlight. People who knew cars would guess it cost well over $1 million. "Is that Richard Mason?" the owner asked, coming out of his office, drawn by the sudden quiet. "Spoke Phantom," Blake confirmed, already walking towards the entrance. "Extremely rare." A driver in uniform got out and opened the back door with perfect white-gloved hands. From the car stepped a man who commanded attention. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that looked very expensive but didn't scream about it. His gray hair was neatly styled, and he stood with effortless authority. Blake's sales instincts kicked in. This wasn't just a good customer. This was the kind of person dealerships fought over, someone who would buy not just one car, but maybe start a relationship worth millions. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors," Blake called out, getting to the man before any other salesman could. "Blake Thompson, sales manager. It's a real pleasure to have you with us today." The man looked at Blake with a face that was hard to read, then offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Alexander Collins," he replied simply, offering a firm handshake. Blake's mind raced. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it right away. No matter. The Rolls-Royce said everything about the man's wealth. "Mr. Collins, it's truly an honor. What brings you to our humble establishment today? Perhaps I could show you our newest arrivals. We just received a limited edition." Alexander raised a hand slightly, stopping Blake's sales pitch. "Actually, I'm here about a specific vehicle. The Azure Coupe, midnight blue." Blake's smile got wider. "Excellent choice, sir. One of only 15 made this year. I'd be delighted to show you. It's actually right over—" "I know where it is," Alexander interrupted smoothly. "My wife was here yesterday, interested in it." Blake's customer service smile stayed put, but confusion flickered in his eyes. Your wife? I don't recall. Perhaps one of my colleagues assisted her? Alexander's expression cooled noticeably. No, Mr. Thompson, you assisted her, or rather, you refused to assist her. Margaret Collins. She was wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. You suggested she might be more comfortable looking at used cars. The color drained from Blake's face as he realized who this was. Behind him, he heard a small gasp from Daniel, who had been standing nearby. Mr. Collins, Blake stammered, his usual smooth talk gone. There must be some misunderstanding. We welcome all customers here. By now, Richard Mason had come over, sensing something was wrong. Is everything all right, Blake? Alexander turned his attention to the owner. Mr. Mason, I presume? Richard Mason, yes indeed. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors. Thank you. I was just explaining to Mr. Thompson that my wife visited yesterday, interested in buying the Azure Coupe as a gift for her sister. She was, however, treated in a way that I find troubling. Richard's face quickly went from welcoming to worried. I'm sorry to hear that. I believe I was briefly involved in a conversation, but I wasn't aware of all the details. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. The details include your sales manager here, suggesting that people like her don't belong in a place like this, just because of her casual clothes. By now, a small crowd had gathered, other salespeople, staff, and even a few early customers. The showroom was completely silent. Mr. Collins, Blake began, desperation in his voice, if there was any misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Daniel suddenly spoke up. Everyone turned to the young salesman, who looked surprised at his own courage. Miss Collins was treated poorly. She was polite and clear about wanting to see the Azure, and she was dismissed again and again because of how she looked. Blake shot Daniel a furious look, but it was too late. Alexander turned back to Richard Mason. You know, it's interesting. My wife started and runs the Collins Foundation for Children with Disabilities. It's been her life's work since before I met her. She's raised over $50 million for special medical equipment and education programs. He paused, letting this sink in. Maggie chooses to dress simply because she believes in living modestly despite our wealth. She finds it keeps her connected to the families she helps. It's one of the many reasons I love her. Richard Mason had gone pale. Mr. Collins, I assure you, this does not reflect the values of our dealership. We pride ourselves on... Actions speak louder than mission statements, Mr. Mason, Alexander interrupted firmly. Now, regarding the Azure, I'm not here to buy just one vehicle. Blake perked up slightly, a tiny bit of hope returning. I was planning to buy the Azure for my wife's sister, as Maggie intended, but I was also considering replacing our company vehicles, 7 in total, and my personal collection could use updating as well. Mason's eyes widened. A sale that big would meet their sales goals for the entire quarter in one go. However, Alexander continued, I find myself wondering if this is the right place for such a significant investment. The silence in the showroom was absolute. Blake looked like he might throw up. Mr. Collins, Richard began desperately, I cannot apologize enough for this terrible incident. I promise you this is not how we do business. Mr. Collins, Richard began desperately, I cannot apologize enough for this terrible incident. I promise you, this is not how we do business. Please, let me make this right. Alexander remained silent, his gaze fixed on Mason, his expression unreadable. The silence in the office was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Alexander spoke, his voice calm but firm. Mr. Mason, he began, I appreciate your apology. However, this is not simply about a bad customer experience. My sister is a highly respected philanthropist, and she was treated with a level of disrespect that is simply unacceptable. Mason nodded, his face pale. I understand, Mr. Collins, and I assure you I will take full responsibility for this. Blake will be disciplined, and I will personally apologize to your sister. That's not enough, Alexander said, his voice hardening. I want to know what you're going to do to prevent this from happening again. I want to see a change in the culture of this dealership. Mason hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. I don't know what to say, Mr. Collins. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Good, Alexander said, his voice softening slightly. I'm glad to hear that. Now let's talk about how we can make this right.